Okay, so for my senior project, I decided to research visual design and kind of what goes on when creating a product. So visual design, as I researched it, I realized more and more that it's not something that an object has, it's the process that it goes through when they create like an item. And so it starts with brainstorming designs. You just take as many ideas as you possibly can and just write them down, draw them out, do whatever you can to remember them. And then you take your designs to a third party and have them look through and just tell you which ones they like and which ones they don't. And just throw out the ones that they don't like and keep the ones that they do. And then you just do that over and over, each time building upon the designs that they said they liked and throwing out the ones that they didn't. And so as you go, you get a more and more refined product. Kind of like all of these prototypes here, just becoming better and better with each iteration until you get the best product possible. And so this is an example. The person I interviewed, Jacob Jankowski, works at Hologic Inc., which create medical devices. And so these are medical interfaces that would be used in hospitals. And they're very slight differences, just the change in shape on the glass panel at the back, a different mouse interface and place to put your hands. But they create slightly different visual effects, and it shows the minute differences that happen every time you have a product reviewed and changed. A slightly more drastic change is, for example, here with what is the first kind of version of Google Glass. And so they obviously just went back and reviewed it tons of times, because by the end they ended up with something that looked like this. And you can just see that they went through probably hundreds of times just refining lines and smoothing curves just until they had something that looked as visually pleasing as they could. So my next question was, how does all of this work? What makes us look at something and say, ooh, I like how that looks, I want to buy it? So as I was researching, I found what is called a knowledge base. We all have kind of the objects that we know and recognize just by looking at them. And so when designing an object, industrial designers, as they're called, talk about the typicality of it. And that's how much it looks like other items of its type. And so that you start with your existing cognition base, and when you look at something, you say, oh, I see how that's related to what I know. So I can see where it matches and where it doesn't. And so it was found in studies that as an object got less and less typical, kind of like these juicers, you'll find that there are a lot of juicers used in examples here, so you might get to see a few more later on. As they moved away from what was considered the normal round juicer, the audience became more and more responsive and more pleased to the idea, up to a point. Because at some point, the juicer's shape just becomes too foreign and too alien. It looks just too different, and people say, oh, that's just too far away, I don't like it anymore. And so that created this sort of curve. And what it means is that as something gets less and less typical, people are more pleased by it, up to a point, which creates the idea of a perfect product. So why? Why do we have these choices, and what influences them? And it was found that people look for self-affirmation in objects. So if they look at an object and say, hey, I like how that looks, it makes them feel good and makes them want to buy it. And so this is especially prominent in highly aesthetic products, so ones that look very different from what they are, what the norm is, I guess. So an example is, yet again, with this fantastic juicer. So $13 on Amazon, what a deal, right? But you could also buy this. Look at it, it's completely impractical. You have nowhere to catch the juice, and even better, you have to pay 10 times the price. 10 times. So why is that? It's because this company, Alessi, has created a visually distinctive product. And in doing so, it has made people say, ooh, look, this is different, this is special, it must be valuable. And so they can sell it for 10 times the price. So having a visually distinctive design allows products to become more valuable in our minds. So for my hands-on project, I decided to make some longboards from scratch, just to kind of familiarize myself and learn about the prototyping process that a product will go through. And so the initial steps that I came up with were I would have to press the wood into a longboard, then create a shape and cut it out, fiberglass it, and finally paint it. And so I started by making a press. So the board initially started, it's just 3 sheets of wood and a curved shape that I just put the wood in and just covered it in bricks. 300 pounds worth of bricks, 4 times. And I left that there for about a month and then moved on to the cutting process once all the glue in between the sheets of wood was dry. And so when it came out, it looked kind of like this, just curved wood, nothing special about it. So I created a template and drew that onto the board, and then many painstaking hours later, it was cut out and beautiful. And so I decided to fiberglass my longboard because it looks cool and because it adds strength to the board. And so I used epoxy resin and sheets of tight weave fiberglass where you just put the resin down and then lay the fiberglass on top, and then another layer of resin, and let that dry for another week. And once it was dry, I created my design. And so this is where I really employed the idea of peer review and bringing it back and just creating a bunch of different iterations of my design. So I started with 3 simple stripes and just gave it to a few friends and said, what do you like about this? What should I change? And they said, you know, we don't like having the straight lines. Make it more curvy. So, number 2. And this time when they looked at it, they said, you know, we don't like seeing all this wood here. Make that nice white and change the colors. So, number 3, with different shades of red this time. And this time when they saw it, they said, no, you know what, we liked the blue more. Make it blue again. So, finally, we came to this and everyone said, you know, I like that design, you should do that one. And so, many hours of painting and taping and waiting later, I had the finished product, mostly. So, here it is, and I created a blank one as well.